you can just accept that. Right on. All right. Well, thanks for being here. Hey, if you haven't remembered, Rod and I record a podcast once a week now. Rachel's on there on occasion, and we look forward to having her on more often as our other partner. So tune in. We've been talking about some great topics on the show. Oftentimes it's an extension of what we talk about on Monday night. So if you like them, spread the word. That's how we get the word out there on the podcasts. So, I'm thinking about the content that we've been giving the last year, as well as the content in our curriculum that Rod and I are teaching at the local high school. And what's crystal clear to me is that the content that we're teaching is foundational. And that's foundational to your business, your entrepreneurial endeavors, your work as an entrepreneur, or even as a family member. So I'm hoping you're taking good notes, because if you can follow along and follow these foundational elements, not only is it going to make you a better person, but it's going to help you in your pursuits. And I started thinking about Rachel speaking tonight. And if you were on last week, you knew that she was coming on, or if you read the email. And I was thinking about Rachel's experience and what she brings to the table and what she's meant to me over the years. Rachel, in my opinion, is one of the top marketing specialists you will find anywhere. The work that I've done, this is success that she's had, not only with some of my campaigns and the companies that I work for, both big and small, but the things that I've seen her do and the achievements over the years. This is a very unique opportunity to have Rachel in our group, bringing her years of experience and success to this group. And you might be thinking, okay, she's a marketing expert. How does that relate to me? I don't even own a business. Well, it does relate, because if you go back to those foundational elements that I'm talking about, there's always a need to grow and learn and add something else to your toolbox for whatever it is you're doing. And Rachel brings that. And I'm really excited to hear what she has to say, whatever the topic is, because I know from her experience in owning her own business, working for big firms, and all the things that I've seen her accomplish, that regardless of what the topic is, we're going to learn something tonight. So I just wanted to give a warm welcome for Rachel and being her night to host, and know that she'll be speaking again. We're going to be rotating now in the future, and I'm just looking forward to tonight. So Rachel, thank you for not only being my partner and everything you've done, but for your presentation tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn my mute on and let you go to town and do your thing. So Rachel, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. That was a fabulous lead in. I'm a big believer in I know the type of motivation that works for me. And I've had different coaches over the years, and I've had the kind of coach, I think there's really like two main types, right? There's the coach that tells you like, you can do it. I believe in you. You're amazing. And that really works for me. So thank you for that. I feel like that. Then there's the other kind of coach that says like, you suck, you can't do it, and then that motivates the people that believe like, oh, I'm going to prove him wrong. And I think statistically that works more with men, but anyways, that's what that made me think of. So our topic for tonight, which Rod puts our topics together and just kind of gives us whatever topic we get what we get, which I like. I didn't want to curate this. So the topic for tonight is think big, ask big, and start at the top. So I'm breaking this talk into 3 sections, and we've got different kind of highlights that we're going to cover in each one. So the first one is going to be think big. We're going in order here. So with think big, there were 2 points that I wanted to dive into on this one. The first one is inspired by Simon Sinek. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Simon Sinek. He's most famous for his Start With Why. It was one of the very first TED Talks that was out there. And he talks about the golden circle, and then he did a book about that. But then he did this follow-up book. And this follow-up book was called Leaders Eat Last. And the reason that I'm thinking about this is a great book for anybody who's looking to improve on their leadership qualities, and improve their business, improve their relationships with their boss or their coworkers. And the principle here is that leaders are the ones who are really, they're looking out for those who are on the left of them, who are on the right of them. They're willing to give up things that are like of their own in order for what's best for the greater good. That could be giving up their energy, giving up their time, their money, or the food off their plate. So when you were thinking about like thinking big, I think leaders often think big, and they have that kind of service mentality in terms of thinking big for the audience of like their employees or their company. The second thing that made me think about was a little more traditional, and this is Amazon with their think big principle. And I don't know if any of you guys have looked this up. It's one of the things that they're known for. But the way that they talk about it is the term to think big for them is to be ambitious or to set no limits on your thinking. Other expressions you might have heard that mean the same thing is like, go large or like reach for the stars, right? Like those are other ways that people talk about thinking big. So, if you are going to think big with the way Amazon describes it, there are 7 things that you're going to do. And there's 4 ways that'll show how that means to you. So first, we're going to talk about the 7 things. If you think big, you will do these 7 things in your life. And start thinking about it, because I'm going to have homework for you guys on this. So if you're taking notes, think about, if you think big, you will, number 1, you'll see problems as challenges and opportunities. So you'll turn those problems into opportunities. Number 2, you will be positive. You'll be a glass half full thinker. Number 3, you think of things that you can do, not things that you can't do. Oftentimes people will come to me and they'll say what their problems are, and they'll look for me as the leader to solve their problems. What I like to reply to them is, okay, what's your recommendation? So these are all the things that you can't do, or these are the problems. What can you do? What can you fix it? What have you brainstormed? What solutions are we going to talk about together? So that was the 3rd one. Think of things that you can do. Number 4, plan what is possible, not worrying about what is impossible, right? And those sort of go hand in hand together. So work with things that are possible. Now, that doesn't mean that it might not be possible today or tomorrow. If you're thinking big, you're thinking the head down the line in the future, but even if it's not possible today, but it's not impossible. Number 5, be fearless. Number 6, be creative. And number 7, be able to dream and visualize what you want. So a part of the 75 Hard program, in the first 75 days, it's very structured in terms of the things that you're doing. But then if you enter into the Live Hard program, which is like an additional 30 days, one of the things that gets added on to the program is visualization. So last year was the first time I started practicing visualization as part of this program, and it was phenomenal. I downloaded an app and I started using some of the prompts that they would give me. And then after a while, I was able to do it on my own and start thinking about what I wanted to visualize for my company, for my children, for my relationships, for my family, how I wanted all that to come together. So number 7, if you're thinking big, you're going to dream big, and you're going to visualize what you want, and you're going to consistently be visualizing those things. All right. So then we're on to the 4 things. So thinking big means, number 5. Yeah, sure. Number 5 was be fearless. So I'll recap them. So number 1 was you see problems and challenges as opportunities. Number 2 was be positive. 3 was think of things you can do, not can't. 4 was plan what is possible. Don't worry about what's impossible. 5 is be fearless. 6 was be creative. And 7, be able to dream and visualize what you want. So if you're thinking big, how does this kind of translate into your world, right? What does thinking big mean? Well, it sometimes can mean that maybe you're taking a risk. Maybe it's a calculated risk, but maybe thinking big will show itself in you, taking a risk in something that you wouldn't normally have done, right? Thinking big could also mean that you are forming a long-term plan. Thinking big could mean number 3, you could be communicating the big picture and mission to a team that other people are going to execute. And you could be actively exploring new ideas, not only for yourself, but you could help other people to do the same. So those are some examples of thinking big. So with that in mind, I have homework for everyone, and this is a little different, but I want you to think about a time that you took a calculated risk in order to achieve a goal. And here's the kicker. I want you to post it on social media and tag the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate. So what was a time that you took a calculated risk in order to achieve a goal? And you're welcome to expand on that. Like, was there trade-offs? What was the outcome? How did it go for you? And then post it on social media and tag the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate. So I really want our community to engage over the weeks, while we're not just on Mondays, but we're on social. We want to hear from you guys. And I would be fascinated to know about a time that you took a calculated risk in order to achieve a goal. So there is the first section on thinking big. The second section is on ask big. So ask big. If you don't ask, then you don't get. I think we all know that. I was driving in the car on Saturday with my grandmother, and I've looked up to her for years and years. She used to come to Grandparents' Day at my school, and she was the only one that would walk in high heels and a suit, and she was a boss. And I was like, I knew from a very young age that she did something that I wanted to do. And she was telling me just this weekend that when she was up and coming through the ranks at McDonnell Douglas, where she worked, that she was in with a meeting, like a review with her boss one day. And he asked her, well, what do you want? And she goes, oh, I don't know, like maybe, if you don't mind, I would like a raise someday. And very, graciously, like meek. And he goes, well, why don't you want my job? Or why don't you want my boss's job? And she goes, yeah, okay, I'll take that. Yeah. And so she reset. She didn't even know that she could ask for that. And then eventually she did go very far in her career. And, that was the first light bulb moment for her, that she could ask for more than what she thought. It just doesn't have to be one step at a time. It could be thinking really big. So that, I think, led me down the path to starting at the top. And when I started going down that rabbit hole, I thought of a movie. I don't know if you guys saw it in the 90s. It was Michael J. Fox, and it was The Secret of My Success. I don't know who remembers this movie, but he was this kid who went to New York, and he had like no experience, and he wouldn't get hired anywhere. And he started at the mailroom, and then he had to he started imitating an executive, and he would like change his clothes in the elevator. And he was like, had a different name, and he was like trying to like get to the boardroom to like matter. Right. And I liked this prompt of start at the top, because if you're thinking about starting at the top, whether it's for your career or your company culture, we could go down those two paths, and we will. But for your career, you don't always have to start at the bottom. Instead, start at the top sometimes. Start your way down. Ask for a meeting with your boss's boss or the owner of the company. Ask for their advice. Ask if you could get some mentoring from them. Even though it's scary to go after what you want and intimidating sometimes to start at the top, those are the people that can really probably help you get where you need to go faster. So successful leaders, high achievers, they like recognizes like. If you see yourself in them or you admire them, don't be intimidated to just go all the way to the top. So that's kind of for your career. But then if you're thinking about company culture starting at the top and how company culture kind of trickles down, that's really important, in alignment of the people at the top should be setting values and ethics and like, work pace that aligns with you. In order for that to be authentic, the leader of your company needs to like have values that are the same as yours. They need to work hard. If they expect you to work hard, they need to, have that alignment with you. So, and more, I think today I was reading an article that organizations are pushing to create leaders who can both not only inspire and lead, but they still want the leaders to perform and do the job. And I think years ago, it was more like once you're an executive, you're just coaching, you're not doing the work anymore. Well, in modern day times, that's not the case. You're in charge of both. You're inspiring leaders, you're giving direction, you're coaching, but you're also having to still perform. You're actually still having to walk the walk and talk the talk. So starting at the top with your culture, and being authentic with that all the way down is very important. So for both of those areas. Okay. I feel like I went through that really fast. It was weird. I didn't like stop for questions or anything, but I know that's kind of how we do it. So maybe Jim and Rod want to like jump in a little bit on this.
Yeah, Rachel, I'm happy to jump in. By the way, it always goes by faster than you think, right? So thank you for that. She brought up a couple critical points, and the one that I like the most, I know it came in the title of the exercise tonight, but think big, right? Thinking big is so important because we limit ourselves in almost everything we do. We don't realize the capacity that we actually have to go after things and succeed at them, but we're so busy limiting our own ability that thinking big doesn't even come into our mind. If you want to obtain something, you should be writing out those goals and making them big, lofty goals. I often refer back to a conversation I had with David Meltzer when Samantha and I launched our business, Baja United Imports. The goal was to donate back to the orphanages in Mexico. I said, Dave, I want to try to donate $100,000. And Dave looked at me like, with this strange look. I thought, oh, he's thinking I'm crazy, right? And Dave goes, why would you limit yourself to $100,000? Why not be the largest donor to the orphanages in Baja? And that really resonated and clicked with me because I realized I was limiting myself, even though that was a lofty number. Why not shoot for more, right? Why can't it be the largest donor with the Baja orphanages? And so today, to expand on that a little bit, I taught in class and I used Ed Milet's book, The Power of One More, as inspiration for the class. And what I talked about is exactly what Ed talks about in that book is if you're asked to do 10, why don't you do 11? If you have to write a chapter, why not write 2? If you're going to send out a resume for a job, why not send out one more? Ed gives a really eloquent story about his daughter that was applying for jobs. She was, she got dropped off and she did an interview and she felt like she did okay, but she wasn't 100%. And she had to wait for her dad, Ed, to come pick her back up. Well, while she was waiting, she remembered what her dad said is always do one more. So instead of waiting on the curbside, she walked into the restaurant next door to the place that she applied for, asked for an application. They interviewed on the spot and she got the job just because she did one more. And I think that supports what Rachel's talking about is asking big. Don't limit yourself, and I know some people in the group are aspiring to make a career jump or move on to the next step. And I hope that you're asking and thinking big with your next step. And Rod, I'm going to give it to you in a second, and then Rachel will go back to you. But I just want to touch on your first bullet points and the homework. And I appreciate that because I made some calculated risks. I left a nice cushy job And, and if you follow me on social media, you're going to hear this twice because Rachel, this is what I'm going to post. I've already thought about the homework. When I was working for Kettle One Vodka, the company sold to Diageo. It was basically a $2 billion deal. And we knew we had an option going into that final meeting with the president, right? You're going to get the axe or you're going to get the offer. Are you going to get both, right? So for me, when I went to that meeting, they said, Jim, this is what we're doing. Of course, as a vice president of the company, I had some insights there. And basically it was like, look, you can move on and work for the new company. They'd love to have you, or here's your severance package, right? I didn't even hesitate. I signed for the severance package and I took a calculated risk in the work that I had done in formulating, this is super appropriate, Azuñia tequila. Happened to be wearing that hat tonight for the first time in probably 8 months. But I took a calculated risk in a business plan I've been writing after hours in a dream of mine, and that was to own my own company, work for myself, and really be an entrepreneur 100%. No more side gig, which I've had since I was 16 years old, but a calculated risk in myself. And it turned out to be a success. So Rachel, I love that exercise. And I can't wait to hear what people post or see what they post for their own calculated risk. So thanks for that. Rod, you got something to add?
Oh, do you think?
Yeah.
Let's see. Rachel, thank you. You delivered, and I a couple of things came to mind because they always do. Anytime I'm listening to anybody who's teaching, training, coaching, I'm like a sponge, and the synapses in my brain just start firing. And you'll say one thing and it leads to something else, and all those things are connected. And this is so connected. You mentioned the no limits. It's ambitious. That's what thinking big is. And that, just thinking that way, removes so many barriers. And I think that's the first thing we need to get in our mind is when we think big, the barriers fall, and it's getting into that mental space, and just starting that conversation makes that huge difference. And then you mentioned who was it? The be better, Google, Amazon.
It was Amazon.
We're going to be bigger, right? Bigger, bigger, bigger. Well, one of the people that Amazon's aligned with to deliver all of their packages also has a high-powered CEO, and she flipped the script on that, and she said, we're going to be better, not bigger. That's her new company motto. So she's delivering for Amazon. This is Carol Tomei with UPS, right? She's delivering for Amazon, and she's flipped their script and made it her own. We're going to be better, not bigger. And in being better, she will be equal to, if not bigger, in some way. She will be the biggest supplier, shipper, right? May not be the biggest deliverer, but she will be the biggest shipper. So sometimes, even when we get to that stage, we can flip the script on it. If we just think outside, Jim, I know you taught on this last week, thinking outside the box. Sometimes flipping that script will get us even bigger than we imagined at first. So that was just a great trigger. And that also reminded me of Steve Jobs with Apple. And he did the whole advertising campaign, which was think different, right? Think different. And that's actually grammatically incorrect, and he knew it. It's supposed to be think differently, right? And he said, no, that's not what we want. We really want to change the script. We want to change everything. We're going to think different. And he started a whole advertising campaign that really that's when he relaunched Apple. So those thinking big requires us to sometimes think differently. I'll use the correct grammar on that. But we have to get into that mindset. And I love the assignment. I start thinking of all these calculated risks, and some of them were poor calculations on my part. Sometimes those are the learning ones. And then lastly, with the ask big, the thing, my takeaway from that is we have to get out of our comfort zone. We sometimes just have to get out of our comfort zone to get to that ask big stage. And getting out of our comfort zone doesn't ever get easier because there's always a new uncomfort zone, right? So staying there keeps us on our edge. I think that it keeps us from being complacent. And I love the delivery. I like just going through the bullet points. I love taking notes because I get to go back through them. And now I've got a movie I've got to watch. How did I miss that one? Right? Secrets of Success. Okay, I've got a movie to watch now. I'll budget that in. But
Well,
thank
and
you.
I have a feeling you're going to take my bullet points, my 7 points, and turn them into one of your clever, what's that called when you have the letters and the,
Oh, an acronym.
thank you. You always
There
turn
you
things into
go.
acronyms. I thought, oh, if Rod was making this presentation, it would be an acronym for sure.
I might have to work on that.
The other thing that I was, as you guys were talking, when I was just starting in advertising, I used to tell everyone that I worked for, yes, I'm going to own my own company someday. Yes, I'm going to own my own. I knew nothing about how to run a company. I'd never seen anybody do it that I personally knew that I could ask advice from, but I knew that I wanted to do that. So I just started saying it over and over and over. And then, 20 years later, I finally got to own my own company. And that was a risk. It was like kind of like Jim leaving corporate America and taking that jump to independence and betting on yourself and saying, I know I can do this. I've been priming myself to do this forever. So, you got to just take those calculated risks at the right time for you. And that could be like us making the jump to being an entrepreneur, or maybe, you're thinking big, could be something totally different, changing your field, or, taking a different life path than you thought. So, change can be scary, but it can also be really rewarding. So I'm glad. Thought big.
Jim, I'm going to jump in one last time here too. I see a hand just popped up, but one thing I will say is if you're on this call, you're capable, right? It's not just saying it over and over again, and one day you will. If you're on this call, you're already fully capable. And that gets back to your message last week, Jim. We're all leaders. We all have that capability. So I again, the barriers are being removed every night, every Monday night when you're on one of these calls, another barrier has been removed, another excuse has been lifted, and I think it's just phenomenal. So I'll yield the floor to.
Looks like
Miss
Taylor's
Taylor.
got her hand up, and I'll let Taylor go, and then I got another comment. So go ahead, Taylor. We just got to get you unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, Rachel, thank you so much. It was really fun to hear from a woman tonight. As much as I love to listen to Rod and Jim talk, and they're super insightful, but I just love how dynamic you guys are with you in the group. So thank you so much for offering all of your insights. I really appreciate it. So I have one observation, and then I'll end with a question. Just listening to everything you had to say, but also Rod and Jim's comments, what I really heard listening to you guys tell your stories and give different examples is the message is kind of take yourself seriously. And that's something that I've really been learning over the years, but a lot with my new business is take yourself seriously, because if you're not doing that, then you don't have the gumption to jump out there and do all of the other things, all those other important things that you listed. So, I mean, I have put myself out there in emails and stuff like that, trying to get traction for my business. And just the fact that I did that and I was serious about it, I could have been like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but if you don't mind, would you mind sharing my account or whatever? But I thought it through. And part of that, I'm going off on a tangent, but part of that, honestly, I feel like is because of the Young Entrepreneurs Syndicate business plan. So anybody else that is watching and has not utilized the business plan outline that you guys have on the, on the website, I highly recommend that, because I mapped that out, I mean, months and months ago when I very first became a member. And I feel like I've been on cruise control since then. Like, I mapped it out and now it's like, all right, I don't have to worry about those things. I know what's coming up next. So thank you guys. Praise to you for doing that. Okay, my last question is, can you define calculated risk? And I know Jim gave an example a little bit, but I'm curious what you mean by calculated as opposed to just a regular old risk.
That's you, Rachel.
Yes. Okay, Taylor, you're very, very welcome. That was so nice. And I love that the business plan outline has been effective for you. That is music to my ears. I think that the tools and the resources that we put on there were really good. So I'm glad that you're using them. That's wonderful. Very good. When you said that you would put yourself out there with the email, I have a challenge for you to go one step further on your business and write a press release. I'm happy to look at it for you and give you some feedback, but putting that pen to paper and putting it out to the media is so powerful. Then it's something, it's like a marker in your business that you always have, and you'll always be able to look back on it. So, I recently put one out for a client who had launched a new restaurant, just literally like started working on it last week. And he was like, oh, nobody's going to care. And the Times, the Business Journal, like the local news channel, they all want to meet with him because what he's doing is really innovative, but he was so close to it that he didn't see that it was so amazing. So sometimes getting another set of eyes to help tell that story is really powerful. So if you put it together, I'd be happy to look at it.
Rachel, I'll jump in with a couple of comments if you don't mind. By the way, on that subject, that advice of a business plan, and Taylor, I know you follow along closely. Rod and I had Rachel draft up a business plan for the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate before she was officially in the group. And that hit the press locally, as you probably remember, it hit the Interlake. That article was read by the president of Stillwater, which then in turn hired us for a 5-figure number. Okay, so Rachel's spot on. Get the word out there. That's your marker. That's your line in the sand. Here I am. I'm ready to go, right? Rod, I'll give it back to you in a second, but I wanted to relate something, about this ask big, think big topic in real terms and what that means to you and how you can actually apply it in your own life based on my own activities that I'm doing, right? So I'm always of this mindset, act big, think big. So I might've talked about it before, but my goal for 2023 is to take on more speaking engagements, right? We're 23 days into the new year. I've booked 3 speaking engagements already. Now, granted, they're local, one of them paid, 2 of them volunteer, but I'm getting the name out there, right? I'm thinking bigger than I did last year and doing something else. The stage that I really want is a long ways down the road. When I mentioned Ed Milet does a number of events. He just did one this last weekend in Utah. Half the stage has been on my podcast. Half of that stage that Ed spoke at has been on my podcast. And I'm thinking, I want to be on that stage next time, right? That's me thinking big. Now, it's easy to say it. What's the plan of attack? Well, I reached back to those members that were on the stage that have been on my podcast, and I'm re-engaging them in conversation. I'm willing to get beyond my comfort zone and go, hey, what's been going on, right? Well, there will be a big ask, and it's going to come sooner than I expected, because one of the people that was responsible for putting that on, I didn't realize it, has been hunting me to be on his show. So my big ask is I'm going to go back to him and say, hey, look, I'll come do the next event for free. It's in New Jersey in a couple months on my dime, but I want to be on the stage and I want to be promoted alongside of those peers that I believe I can have a space on the stage with, right? So that's me thinking big. That's my big ask. That's real life story. I want you to think about how that relates to you and how you're going to make that next big ask and not sit dormant in what your thoughts are, right? So good lesson. Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to address your question straight up, Taylor, and that was, what is a calculated risk? A calculated risk, everything has risk, okay? And that's what the business plan is for. A calculated risk means you are risking capital, you're risking time, effort, and reputation. You are risking a little bit of yourself in every aspect when you start or launch a business. A calculated risk is when you have looked at all the negative things that could happen. You could not sell one thing. It could flop. It could not work. But the calculated risk is, have you lost enough money that it's going to bankrupt you, or is it just going to set you back a little bit? Are you going to have to retool, rethink, remarket, re-engage, repackage, anything to get a foothold to get you where you want to go? A calculated risk is just looking at worst case scenarios, planning for them, and making sure that they don't sink your boat. A calculated risk is having not only life jackets, a calculated risk is having a lifeboat, right? A savings plan, a rainy day plan, call it whatever you want, knowing you've got enough equity in your home that you're not going to get hurt. Having a job, you start off as a side hustle as opposed to risking everything on a full-time venture. That's a calculated risk. So you don't put it all out there. You're not being stupid. You're not being foolish. You're planning. And again, that's why the business plan is so essential. Again, look at worst case scenarios. If you're on the Titanic, make sure you're one with a life jacket. Make sure you're hanging out with the right people so you're first on board. Make sure you got oars. And if you have a cell phone that works, not on the Titanic, but have your options covered. Have safety nets. That's what calculated risks are. You're not jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
Well, Rod, that's a great example of calculated risk. I just gave my example of thinking big and offering a free speaking engagement that's in New Jersey. So my calculated risk in that story is I'm going to cover the flight. I'm going to cover my hotel rooms and my meals, and I'm going to sacrifice my time to do that. That's my calculated risk, that the return of me being on that stage and being promoted within that group of peers, that I'll pick up some business out of it, right? That I'll grow my audience. So there's all kinds of calculated risk. And by the way, if you're not budgeting in your business plan for calculated risks, then you need to reevaluate your budget and where your business is going, because that is an expenditure that can fall under marketing as things that you're willing to try to expose your brand out there. So look, I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel, and she could put a bow on this night. And if there's more questions, let's get them in before we close it up. But Rachel, why don't you put on a bow on this thing, and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'm really grateful that you guys were talking for a little bit, because what I was doing real quick is, in the back end of the website, when you log in as a member, you have access to the reference library, and that's all well and good. You have to log in and look. And when you do, you'll see a bunch of resources that are available to you. But I can't just like post the link because you have to be logged in. But what I did really quick while we were here is I made a quick private page that you guys can all use. And it just has a business plan on it. So if you need it, there it is. I just put it in the Zoom chat. And that way it's easily accessible for all of you. Yes. Don't forget about the homework. Don't forget now. Oh, here's a little marketing tip, by the by. So as we all know, TikTok is, killing it right now, and video is becoming more and more important. So it came out in the advertising circles a couple of days ago that Instagram is going to be changing their platform again. And some of the functionality is going to be reducing. and they're going more and more towards video, more and more towards being like TikTok. So I think what's going to happen pretty rapidly over the next, let's call it 6 months, generously a year, but it's not going to take that long, is this is what's going to separate that line in the sand for people. This is who is going to be on one side of it's going to be the legit content creators, the legit businesses, the legit brands and people who are doing video work. And anyone that's just photos is going to be like, oh yeah, that's like a mom, that's a grandma, they're falling to the wayside. It's just private usage, like whatever. But this is going to be that divide, and it's going to happen faster than we all think. So you can post it and tag us and you can do a photo, but I challenge you, like double challenge is make it a video. When you do your homework and you put what your thing was or your answer, try to make it a video. Try to have fun with it. Make it a reel. Play with music. Use the closed caption feature. Like, try to start getting yourself more familiar with using the editing tools in the platforms, because it's going to be really important to the growth and the health of your personal brand and of your business brand over the next 6 months, 12 months, and beyond that. So that's what I'm leaving you guys with today. More video, everybody, all the time.
Rachel, excellent job. By the way, where'd you read that at?
I'll forward it to you. I'll put it on social media and you guys can all find it there.
Excellent. Right on. Well, look, Rachel, I thank you for hosting tonight and your great topic, Think Big, Ask Big. And my desire is that everybody in here is not only being a participant like we always talk about, but thinking big and asking big. And we're here to support you. The tools are there. As Taylor suggested, the business plans worked for her. And we're going to continue to grow that tool chest and offer resources. So look forward to having everybody on the call next week. By the way, we are having a little bit of a challenge on all the emails about these calls getting out. So we're working through that. Just know, since you're on here, the link is always the same. Okay. So if you've got an old link, it's always the same and you can use that, but it is nice to get the emails as a reminder. So we're working on it. Thanks again for your membership. Rod, good luck tonight. I know you're heading off to civic duties. So thank you both for being here. Talk to everybody soon.
Thanks. Good night.